was a newspaper reporter for 17 years. Jason Trahan, the producer I worked with on this, we both came out of the newspaper industry. So we have a great love of the written word, right? That's where we came from. But I truly believe that there is something about seeing it, seeing these videos. I knew I had accomplished something when hardened journalists were crying watching these before they aired. I knew that I had connected on a human level. That's really hard to do with people that, are in our business. We've seen a lot, we've experienced a lot. And I think when you watch these segments, you really connect with the officers and what they were going through that night. Now, it's vicarious. Obviously, you're not experiencing it the exact way they experienced it, but it's a vicarious emotion of seeing and hearing and feeling some of what they felt. And again, I'm an old newspaper reporter, but there is something powerful about seeing it through the lens of the police officer. And that's what these body cams and these dash cams do. I had somebody who tell me who watched it that one of the really impactful things for them was hearing an officer breathing, because you can kind of feel the fear and the terror and so it doesn't completely take you into their world, but it's about as close as we can get to it to understand what police experienced that night. And again, it's the horror and the heroism. I mean, I was struck on these videos, and we had it in some of our videos too, when you see people fleeing and police running. But, in these cases with the body cams, you hear the officer breathing as he's running towards the gunfire. Maybe this is why I'm not a police officer, but I don't know that I'd be doing the same. Running towards the gunfire? I don't know that I'm that brave. I mean, there is amazing bravery that I firmly believed and have always believed that people need to see. And I'm glad they've seen it. I know from my own perspective, watching these videos, it was really hard. It was really hard. Even in the cases where they had redacted some of the more difficult images out, you just know, like in the case of Patrick Zamaripa, to see him hop out of that squad car and run towards the gunfire, and you know how it's going to end. You know that he's going to die. That is just gut-wrenching. And I just think people need to see it. And I've always thought that. For years, the Dallas Police Department fought the release of these videos. And they actually won the initial rounds preventing the release of all documentation or most of the documentation related to what happened on the night of July 7th, 2016. And a few years ago, Jason Trahan, who's a producer that I was working with on this, we decided that we weren't going to let it go. So in 2018, we filed another open records request. And we won that battle with the Attorney General. But it took a long time. DPD initially just really wasn't releasing anything, even though we had won that Attorney General's ruling. So DPD, even though we had won the Attorney General's ruling, they were not releasing the records in a timely fashion. And so about maybe 4 to 6 months ago, Jason filed a complaint with the Attorney General's office and said, hey, the Dallas Police Department is not complying with your ruling. And starting in about March, we suddenly began getting a flood. And when I say a flood, I mean a flood of documents and videos, just an enormous amount of body cam, dash cam, pictures, thousands of pictures. It took me quite a while of going through these materials to understand what various things were. It's like in the case of the dash cam where you see Patrick Zamaripa hop out of the car and run towards the gunfire. I didn't recognize what that was until later. Later on, I found a master vehicle list, and that actually told me who was in the individual squad cars, and that's how I was able to go, oh, that's Patrick Zamaripa, and then, oh my God, he's running to his death. And I know when Give me a second. Ooh, I do not like emotion. When it clicked in my head what I was looking at, I was watching an officer get out of the car, and he has no idea he's about to run to his death. Wow. That's hard. And then as time went on, I began to identify people I knew in the videos, like Rick Rivas, for example. You saw the piece, and Rick is describing climbing the stairs, and he's saying the Lord's Prayer, thinking that this might be the last moment he has on this earth. He might never see his wife and his kids again. And when I realized what I had, that I had video of the moment that he's describing, that's just, you can't, wow. It's hard to watch. And of course, I've watched a lot more than what you saw in that segment. But in my heart, I believe people have to see this. You have to see that heroism. As I was watching, a line rolled through my head is, you have to see both the heroism and the horror. I knew that there had been that Micah had shot at the officers on the second floor. But my God, seeing that video and seeing the firefight and how dangerous this was, it's really a miracle no more police officers didn't die. Because the way this building is it's kind of like a maze. And police really didn't have a sense of the layout of it. We can see on some of the body cams where police are trying to figure out, like, what is the layout of this building? And actually, Micah could have gotten out. There was actually a door right behind him, a wooden door, a double wooden door, that if he had busted through that door, he would have been able to come around and go through the library and potentially get out. So, just knowing that, like, that this guy could have gotten out. Going back to the firefight, they really had no cover. These are sheetrock walls, and a rifle round is going to, as Rick Rivas said, slice through it like butter. And if they all like camped out in the stairwells, well, then they don't really have good coverage on him. They had to keep an eye on him. They had to make sure he doesn't get away. So there's really no good options. And I think while I understood intellectually why the decision was made to use the robot, I got it. 5 years ago, I understood. But when you see the videos and you see like how things are structured and where things are, then you really understand. You really understand that he left them no choices. There were no good choices. Trying to come in through the roof or rappelling down or using a 50 cal, none of these things would have worked. And simply waiting him out, became not an option. You cannot let him continue to kill more people. And he was making it clear that he was going to kill more people. And I guess the other thing is, we've never heard audio of him talking to police. Just none of this has ever been heard. And so that was fascinating to me, to hear his back and forth with Larry Gordon, the SWAT negotiator, and what Micah's thinking was. And so it's on that recording that you hear Larry Gordon, the SWAT negotiator, come up and begin talking to him. And he's actively trying to slow this thing down, calm this thing down. And actually, Micah doesn't shoot anymore after Larry gets there. So I think his effort to slow it down and is successful, except for Micah is, again, very clear he is not coming out. And he even tells Larry Gordon that he should turn around and shoot the officers behind them, which is just, wow. It's just very interesting to listen to. And you can tell he's lucid. He has a plan, and he's trying to carry it out. Oh, I've had people say to me, why should this ever be public? I've had those conversations. I've had those conversations with Dallas police officers. I've had people tell me that, kind of like, why can't you just let it go? And again, I just keep going back to people need to see this. I mean, we live in an era right now where there's so much anti-law enforcement sentiment, and there's been horrible things that have happened. But there was a lot right that happened that night. And we need to hold police officers accountable when they do wrong, but we need to praise them when they do right. And there was a lot that went right that night. And that's really always been fundamentally my reason why I think people need to see it. And on a personal level, I knew one of the 5 officers. I knew Lauren Ahrens. He was somebody I had known for years, and his death broke my heart, and it made what happened that night really extremely real to me. To know that someone I had talked to on the phone a lot, suddenly his children are left without a father. His young children are left without a father. I mean, that for me has always stuck with me. I just want people to remember these 5 officers. I really do. And I think we should say their names. Michael Smith, Lauren Ahrens, Patrick Zamaripa, Brent Thompson, and Michael Kroll. These 5 men, they gave their lives. They saved other people's lives. But it wasn't just them. There were hundreds of officers who exemplified enormous heroism that night. And I think we as a society should remember that. There were officers that were injured. And then there were other officers that they may not have been injured, but they suffered the emotional after effects of something that is so traumatic that you can barely put it into words. Rick Rivas, for example, initially turned me down when I asked him to do an interview, because I had heard that Rick had a story to tell. And another officer actually convinced him to do the interview. And I'm glad he did, because Rick was probably one of the most emotional, raw interviews that we have in the piece. And that may be partly because he had not talked about it as much. But I think people need to see how this affected police officers. This wasn't something that happened one night and everybody moved on. It changed the lives of the families that lost their loved ones. You know, children growing up without their fathers. I just think that we need to remember. I really do.